What's older than we think? Sharks. Sharks as an animal are older than trees. I knew they were old, but damn not that old. I looked it up, and fossils are said to be around 450 million y/o. My contribution to this thread was ferns, 359 million y/o. But sharks are another 100 mil before that. Mind equals blown. Escalators have been around since 1859, though they were called rotating stairs. Yet the US state of Wyoming still only has 2 of them. Granted, it's not like Wyoming has enough people to really need any more. Flushing toilets date all the way back to the Indus River Valley civilization. Back in 2000 BC, ancient Minoans, 3000-1100 BCE, had hot and cold running water and an extensive sewage system. Romans had pipe-heated floors. Something I still thought was awesome when my aunt got it like a decade ago. The electric car. What is likely the first human carrying electric vehicle with its own power source was tested along a Paris street in April 1881 by French inventor Gustave Trouve. The first crude electric car was built in the 1830s, but it was essentially a semi-functioning model. The electric car was a direct competitor to gasoline-powered vehicles until the 1920s, when roads got better. People started driving further than the range of an electric car, and the world started finding major oil reserves. Weren't the first electric cars using lead-acid batteries? If so, when the batteries eventually discharged, did people go somewhere to replace their battery with a new one? Lead-acid, like car batteries, are rechargeable. National Geographic was founded in 1888, same year as Foster's and Jack the Ripper. Holy shit. The ancient Romans, well, the wealthy ones, had central heating in their homes. You can actually still see the pipes in some of the buildings at Herculaneum. What I think is really cool from Herculaneum is that we are able to recover writing from the libraries there. The pyroclastic flow didn't turn the papyrus to ash. It preserved in a very damaged state. But thanks to lasers we can see the words that were once visible on the pages. Thanks to lasers. Thanks, lasers. The name Tiffany, it dates back to the 12th century and has actually led to a thing in writing called the Tiffany problem. Because you can have a well-researched historical novel that people just don't buy into. Because you named your 12th century peasant Tiffany, it just sounds laughably anachronistic. The Tiffany problem makes me think of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and the name Jessica. He wanted the love interest, who was Jewish, to have a super exotic name, so he invented the name Jessica. The name has become so common since then that it's totally lost its effect. Shakespeare also randomly invented the word gossip because he needed to define a bunch of wives in the town talking shit and spreading rumors. And now it's part of common English language. Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd. 51. Exclamation mark. What the hell? That's just his mainland age. Over here, Kuna has no age. Oreos. I was shocked to learn that Oreos predate chocolate chip cookies, sliced bread, and my 100-year-old great-grandmother. And before Oreos, there was Hydrax. And before Hydrax, there was the Dark Times. Brain surgery. In 1997. Archaeologists discovered an ancient tomb in the French village of Ensishim from 50th BC, which contained the decomposing body of a 50-year-old man with holes in his skull. After a thorough examination, it was determined that the holes, located near the frontal lobe, were caused by a type of surgery, not by forced trauma, and the operation appears to have been successful because the wounds healed before the patient's death. To this day, however, researchers cannot say for sure what exactly the surgery was trying to fix. Nintendo. This company was actually created in 1889. Nintendo was founded in 1889. Van Gogh painted Starry Night in 1889. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889. Hitler made the worst video games. That's why nobody likes him now. Ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians were as old to the ancient Romans as the ancient Romans are to us. Cleopatra is chronologically closer to us than she is to when the pyramids were built. Woolly mammoths were still alive during the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. They died out about a millennium after its completion. Stonehenge. It predates the oldest pyramid in Egypt by nearly 300 years. Always the first wonder in CV. It would be nice if the AI would let me grab it for once. But nope. I've even had a game where Shaka, from the Ducking Zulus, built it before me. Oh, I see you are a man of culture as well. I don't know if this counts, but dinosaurs lived on the earth a lot longer than most people think. When you think of dinosaurs, you think of their extinction, but they roamed the earth for 165 million years. Compare that to our 6 million, and it's almost mind-boggling. At least in edit, the modern form of humans is 200,000 years old, but if we include our humanoid ancestors, we've been here 6 million years. Edit 2, I get it. Dinosaurs are still around. What I meant to say was the dinosaur era. Also, dinosaurs like the Stegosaurus were as far apart in time from the T-Rex as the T-Rex is from our time. It's even better than that. We are about 16 million years closer to the last Tyrannosaurus than the first Tyrannosaurus was to the last Stegosaurus. Contact lenses. Leonardo da Vinci had the idea of contact lenses in 1508 and the first successful contact lenses were made in 1888. In so many fields, he was way ahead of his time. The guy truly was a visionary. He literally invented a diving suit and a paraglidalong before they were actually invented. Scientists even tested whether his designs worked as intended and they did. It's insane how far ahead of his time he was. Trees. There are a lot of trees that are older than you would expect. In the fairgrounds of the town I grew up in there's a coronation oak that was planted for King George IV, 1820. If it wasn't for the little sign you'd never know the tree was that old. There's a tree in my backyard that is so huge that we had to attempt an age calculation. Using the circumference we calculated that it's about 190 years old. That's insane to me. The normal, plaqueless, non-heritage tree in my backyard is just casually almost 200 years old. It's a beautiful white oak. Beer. It's one of the oldest prepared drinks in the world. It not only predates every civilization, but actually contributed to their creation. It's a tale as old as time. Getting ducking wasted to forget your problems. 10 as old as time. Beer's as old as wine. Beauty of the East. Oxford University. It's older than the Aztec Empire. I think this one is actually a reverse of the question. The Aztec Empire is much more recent than most people think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the surprise in this fact comes from the confusion between Aztecs and Mayans. If you didn't know the time period you could understand the confusion. The year 1990. We are as close to it as we are the year 2050. I was born in 1990, and I hate this. I was 10 years old in 1990 and still think it was only 10 years ago. Social media. Wealthy ancient Romans had a system where they used slaves as scribes and messengers in order to share gossip and art/poetry and news updates with friends in their social circle. Augustus. Call slave. I want to share this joke with Poniatus. Dominus. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Poniatus's slave has arrived with a scribe. It says share this with 15 slave masters, or you'll die from Antoine plague. Apostrophe. Netflix. I feel like it is only a few years old, but it was invented in 1997. I remember getting DVDs by mail from Netflix. I have been a continuous subscriber since 1997, before the streaming service even began. For a lot of us, ourselves, I've known for a while that I'm older now than my mom and dad were when I was born. But the other day, I realized I actually have memories of them when they were younger than I'm now. That's proper weird to think about and really made me think I'm a lot older than I feel. That said, my parents are older than I think too. They're only a few years away from the age I remember my nana and granddad being. Yeah, I'm 11 years older than my mother was when she had me. Crazy to think about. I've long passed that milestone in the rear view. My parents were young when they had me compared to now. They had me at 21, and I had mine at 31. Weird how times and social acceptance have changed in just one generation. The food at the back of your cupboard. I have a bottle of Worcestershire sauce that expired the 28th of April 2009 in my fridge. That means that bottle A made the trip from NJ to Florida with me in 2010. B is the lone survivor from my bachelor pad fridge from 2012 to 2014. C made it into my fridge when my wife and I bought a house in 2014. It's been sitting there ever since. You moved from NJ to Florida and brought along a bottle of Worcestershire sauce that was already expired and have kept it for another 10 years. Through yet another move. I hope you're that dedicated to your wife. The sentiment that modern society is degenerate and that the youth are to blame is, one of the oldest things we have written down that I can remember off the top of my head. Cato the Elder complained that the younger generations were becoming too Greek, and Socrates used to complain that the younger generations were ruining their brains by writing instead of memorizing information. There are far more older examples, but those are the oldest I remember. Maybe Socrates was onto something. P. Socrates. My head hurts. It's because you always on that damn scroll. Don't be so negative. This is the morally correct choice. The new I scroll ships without a quill or seal to reduce the environmental impact. Cruise control, power windows and automatic headlights. I saw all three on a 1955 Cadillac. Oh, and the radio on it had a seek function. I was really surprised to discover when Oxford University was founded. They don't know the year for sure, but they know there was definitely teaching going on there in 1096. Another commenter above said that Oxford isn't even the oldest university, but it's the most well known. Jennifer Lopez. She's 51. Shit. Jennifer Aniston is 51 too. The world in general. The theory that if all of the Earth's history were laid out on a calendar, our current century would only make up the last 10 seconds or so of December 31st. Always blows my mind to consider it that way. It's smaller than that. The last 6 minutes modern humans evolved. The Roman Republic was about the last 7 seconds. Columbus arrived in America 1 second to midnight. Your nipples are older than your teeth. My ducking teeth feel itchy now. My nipples explode with delight. Google, Reddit, YouTube. It's hard to imagine that they already have been around for 15 years with Google actually being around 20 years old. Our entire generation has now grown up that cannot remember that it wasn't always there. As someone that was in high school when the internet hit the mainstream, it boggles my mind that pretty much anyone younger than me has no concept of life without the answer to any question imaginable being at your fingertips, hindered only by your patience to sift through the results. I had a class in elementary school to teach us how to use a dictionary, encyclopedia, and almanac, and, to some degree, the internet, though the teacher made it pretty clear the internet was absolutely second fiddle to the other things and probably wouldn't be around in 10 years. Do they still have those classes nowadays, or are they a thing of the past? Betty White. She's literally older than sliced bread and chocolate chip cookies. How we view time when video games and movies come out and or are edited in some way. Star Fox 64 came out about 24 years ago. Kevin from Home Alone is 40. Nintendo DS. 16 years ago. I feel old. Touchscreen in cars. That has been around since 1986. My aunt had a Mercury Cougar with a GPS and touchscreen in the 90s. Good call. I think about how crude it is now. I'm assuming because I don't remember that well, but back then it was jaw-dropping. Commercial aircraft. Most are 10, 15 years old, yet a lot of people think they get replaced like cars. They are still very safe though despite their age. More than a few are over 30 years old. The fact that the lighter is older than the match shook my head as a kid. It also gave me the curiosity to question things that seems obvious. When you think about it, it makes sense. The lighter is a simple mechanical concept, some flammable gas and a spark. The match, on the other hand, is a complex chemical reaction. A Native American empire nearly a third of the size of the present-day United States existed in the Great Lakes region at the time the Old Testament of the Bible was thought to be written. Local town has a huge mound from them, and a fair bit of history. Stupid name though. They decided to call it Moundsville. Lore. Roman law was so advanced that there are still large chunks of statutes in civil law countries, taken pretty much directly from Roman codicy written 1500 to 2000 years ago. Important maritime laws are adaptations of medieval provisions. Lots of business law statutes borrow heavily from Napoleonic laws. In common law countries, you find stuff like the Statute of Marlborough from the 1200s, still in effect, along with still relevant case law from the 1700s. Sharks. As a species they're older than the rings of Saturn. Holy shit, I've heard of the tree thing, but this is new. Any sources? Earth. A large portion of autism spectrum disorders, about 40% of them have been in human genetics since 8000 BCE. Goddamn genetic bottleneck causing supervolcano eruption. It's theorized that modern times are much harder on autistic people. It's louder and more stressful. An autistic person who may struggle now with fluorescent lighting, loud office spaces, and chaotic schedules may have flourished being a shepherd or a baker hundreds of years ago. People born in 2000, 20 years old, / there are people who were born after 9/11 and now are old enough to serve in the war in Afghanistan. Oxford University is the oldest English-speaking university in the world. Teaching began in Oxford University in 1096 and developed rapidly from 1167, when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. The founding of Tenochtitlan in 1325 marked the start of the Aztec civilization, which makes Oxford University more than 200 years older. Oxford is also 300 years older than Machu Picchu and 150 years older than the Easter Island Heads. The 80s. They were 40 years ago, but it feels like 20 years ago. Queen Elizabeth. The heliocentric model and atomic theory. Aristarchus first came up with the heliocentric model 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus, and Leucippus proposed atomism 5 centuries before the birth of Jesus. When we say the Greeks were the basis of Western culture, the more you learn the more you discover how true that really is. We spent 2 millennia catching up to where the Greeks were at. By the law of conservation of mass, no mass can be created or lost, simply moved or changed into something else. Your body and all inside of it and everything in the universe for that matter has been around since the very start, only in random atoms etc. And when we die our bodies are recycled back into the universe to be made into something cool, like cow poo. Fireworks. Water. That water you're drinking is as old as the earth. This is pretty dependent on how you classify the age of water. Water molecules are constantly being broken and formed. The protons split off and move around from one hydroxy group to another. Metabolic water is produced in your cells from precursors that were in water. Kinda becomes a philosophical question like the ship whose spars and beams have all been individually replaced over time. Is it the same ship? Ship of Theseus for those wanting to look it up. I have a bottle of shampoo from the GDR. Matchsticks. The lighter is still older. Strangely enough. That's so weird. I wasn't aware of that. The song Friday. Technically, it's older than most 3rd graders, having been released in 2011. So there have been 505 Fridays since it was released. Wow. That's a lot of getting down. For context, there have only been 42 21st of Septembers since the song was released, and that's only the ones I can remember. The wealthiest of the ancient Minoans had very close to modern day plumbing. The entire Minoan culture is really fascinating, not to mention their poor choice of clothing. Lol. Jared Leto. He's going to be 50 next year, but hasn't aged since the 90s. The idea that everything's getting worse and that the world's coming to an end soon. Sure, there's new vocabulary and new science involved, but people have been sounding that pessimistic alarm throughout history. Contraceptives such as condoms were around a very long time and made of hard leather. The Stanley Cup. It predates the NHL, and if you look at the history of teams that have won it, there is a year where it wasn't awarded due to the Spanish flu pandemic. The top of it is the original trophy, but the rings on the bottom are replaced every couple of years when they fill up with names. Chuck Norris. The Judas 80. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.